Picture this. It's 1875, and you're an Ottoman government official staring at the national budget. The numbers don't make sense. They can't make sense. Your entire empire's annual revenue is 21.7 million pounds. But your debt payments alone are 12 million pounds. That's more than half of everything you collect in taxes, just to pay interest on money you've already borrowed. You run the numbers again. Two-thirds of every tax dollar collected across the entire Ottoman Empire, from Istanbul to Baghdad, from Damascus to Cairo, goes straight to European bankers. Not to pay off the debt, just to cover the interest. And the worst part? You still need to borrow more money just to keep the government functioning. On October 6, 1875, the Ottoman Empire does what was previously unthinkable. They default. They simply stop paying, because they literally can't afford to pay anymore. Within just a few years, European creditors will establish the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, a foreign-controlled organization that takes direct control of Ottoman taxes and sends the money to Europe. The Ottoman Empire loses financial sovereignty, and from there, it's only a matter of time before they lose everything else. Hey, I'm Brandon, and welcome back to My Money Mint, the channel where I dive into topics related to money and wealth. All right, let's get into it. Here's what should terrify you about this story. The Ottoman Empire was one of the most powerful empires on Earth. For over 600 years, they dominated 3 continents. At their peak, they controlled more territory than Rome. And debt destroyed them in less than 2 decades. Let me show you exactly how it happened, because the parallels to America today are impossible to ignore. Until 1850, the Ottoman Empire had never borrowed money from foreign banks. Their financial situation was generally sound. They lived within their means, collected taxes, paid their bills, and maintained one of the world's most powerful militaries. Then came the Crimean War in 1854. The Ottomans were fighting Russia, and the war was expensive. They needed European help, both military and financial. So on August 24th, 1854, they took their first foreign loan. It seemed like a reasonable decision at the time. Borrow some money, win the war, pay it back from future revenues. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. The problem wasn't just that they borrowed money, it was the terms of these loans. Financial commentators noted that the conditions were exceptionally favorable to the French and British banks, primarily the Rothschild banking houses that facilitated them. In other words, the Ottomans were getting screwed from day one. High interest rates, short repayment periods, and fees that ate into the actual money received, but they were desperate, and European bankers knew it. After 1854, the borrowing never stopped. They took more loans in 1858, 1860, 1862, 1863, 1865, and then every single year from 1866, 1869 to 1874. Each new loan was supposed to be the last one. Each time they promised this would be enough to get their finances under control, but each loan just created the need for more loans. By 1875, just 20 years after that first loan, the Ottoman Empire owed 200 million pounds to European creditors. In today's money, that's about the 24.3 billion pounds. But here's what made it catastrophic. Their entire annual revenue was only 21.7 million pounds. They owed nearly 10 times their annual income. For comparison, America's current debt to GDP ratio is about 7.8. The Ottomans were at 10. They had entered debt levels that no economy could sustain. Now you might be wondering, what were they spending all this borrowed money on? Surely they were investing in things that would increase future revenues, right? Wrong. Much of the money went to military spending that accomplished nothing. The Ottoman military was hemorrhaging cash across multiple conflicts. An army of 60,000 soldiers and 40,000 horses required 500,000 kilograms of food per day. The expenses crippled the national treasury. In 1875, the Ottoman Navy had 21 battleships and 173 warships of other type, the third largest naval fleet in the world after Britain and France. This massive military expenditure, combined with palace construction and lavish imperial court spending, drained resources that could never be recovered. Sound familiar? It should. But here's where it gets even worse. Some of the borrowed money wasn't even going to useful projects. The Ottoman government was literally borrowing new money to pay back old loans. They were using one credit card to pay off another credit card. The ultimate financial death spiral. And the corruption was staggering. Ottoman tax collection was characterized by corrupt officials and faulty record keeping. The government couldn't even collect the taxes they were owed, let alone generate enough revenue to service their debts. By 1874, even domestic Turkish bankers refused to lend to their own government, even at 25% interest rates. When your own citizens won't loan you money at any price, you know you're finished. The rumors of bankruptcy made Ottoman bonds nearly worthless on European markets. Nobody wanted to touch them. The empire that had once been seen as a first-class borrower was now viewed as a basket case. Then came the final blow. The Panic of 1873, a global financial crisis, depressed economies across Europe. Ottoman exports collapsed. Then, poor harvests in 1873, 1874, and 1875 caused food shortages that further reduced tax revenues. The Ottoman government was trapped. They couldn't borrow more money because nobody would lend to them. They couldn't pay their existing debts because they didn't have enough revenue, and they couldn't increase revenue because their economy was collapsing. On October 6, 1875, they officially suspended interest payments on £214.5 million worth of debt. The Ottoman Empire, one of the world's great powers, had defaulted. European creditors were furious. They had loaned billions to the Ottomans, and now they weren't getting paid. So they did something that had never been done before on this scale. They demanded direct control of Ottoman finances. In 1881, the Ottoman Public Debt Administration was established. This organization had representatives from Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Austria, and the Netherlands. Its sole purpose was to collect Ottoman taxes and send the money to European bondholders. Think about how insane this is. A foreign organization, controlled by European powers, was given authority to collect taxes inside the Ottoman Empire and decide how that money was spent. The OPDA controlled many of the empire's important revenues. They had power over financial affairs. Their control extended to determining the tax on livestock in individual districts. An Ottoman policeman couldn't even enter the home of a foreign national without permission from that person's consul or embassy. The empire had lost sovereignty over its own territory. This wasn't a loan anymore. It was economic colonization. And it got worse. The Ottomans had something called capitulations, agreements that gave European traders special privileges. These traders were exempt from Ottoman taxation, Ottoman prosecution, Ottoman conscription, and even searches of their property. The 1838 Anglo-Turkish Commercial Convention took this to another level. It set tariff rates for European goods at just 3% and abolished all state monopolies within the Ottoman Empire. In forcing the Ottomans to accept free trade, the British delivered the death blow to Ottoman manufacturing. Economic historian Paul Bayrock argues that this forced free trade contributed directly to Ottoman deindustrialization. While countries like Japan and China were protecting their industries, the Ottomans were forced to open their markets completely. European goods flooded in, destroying local industries. Ottoman craftsmen couldn't compete with British and French factories. The empire became dependent on European manufacturing while their own industrial capacity withered away. Economic weakness translated directly into territorial collapse. The Treaty of San Stefano in 1878 forced the Ottomans to recognize independence for Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro. They had to concede autonomy to Bulgaria, cede territory to Russia, and pay an indemnity. Each territorial loss meant less tax revenue to service the debt. The Khedive of Egypt was so desperate for money that he sold his shares in the Suez Canal to the British government in 1875. Then, in 1882, Britain simply occupied Egypt outright, using military assistance as a pretext. By the end of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was known as the sick man of Europe. The only reason European powers didn't carve up the entire empire immediately was that they were trying to maintain a balance of power among themselves. The Ottomans had become a political football for European great powers to manipulate. When World War I broke out in 1914, The Ottoman debt stood at 139.1 million Turkish pounds. France held 60% of the total debt. Germany had 20%, and Britain owned 15%. The empire was completely dependent on European financiers. They entered the war on the side of Germany partly because of German financial backing, and when the war ended, the Ottoman Empire collapsed entirely. But here's the kicker. Even after the empire ceased to exist, the debt didn't go away. The newly formed Republic of Turkey inherited the Ottoman debt and continued making payments. The last payment on Ottoman debt wasn't made until May 25, 1954, more than 3 decades after the empire's dissolution. The Ottomans' great-great-grandchildren were still paying for loans taken out in the 1850s. Now let's talk about why this matters to you. America's federal debt stands at $37 trillion as of August 2025. That's 119% of GDP, approaching Ottoman-era proportions relative to the economy. Like the Ottoman Empire's dependence on British and French banks, America relies heavily on foreign creditors. As of December 2024, foreign countries held $8.5 trillion in U.S. Treasury securities. Japan holds $1.06 trillion, the UK holds $809 billion, and China holds $759 billion. U.S. military spending mirrors Ottoman overextension. The Department of Defense 2026 budget request is $892.6 billion. From 2001 through 2022, America spent an estimated $8 trillion on post-9/11 wars, all financed through debt, just like the Ottomans financed their wars. And here's where the Ottoman parallel becomes most alarming: interest payments. In 2024, U.S. interest payments totaled $881 billion, nearly tripling from $223 billion in 2015. Interest is now the government's third biggest spending area, behind only Social Security and healthcare. It exceeds what we spend on national defense. Over the next decade, interest payments are projected to total $13.8 trillion. By 2027, if current policies continue, debt will reach 106% of GDP. By 2047, it could hit 200% of GDP. The Ottoman death spiral: military overreach leads to massive borrowing, inability to service debt leads to default, foreign control of finances leads to loss of sovereignty, economic colonization leads to territorial disintegration, final collapse leads to decades of debt payments by successor states. America isn't the Ottoman Empire, and the global financial system is different. But the fundamental dynamics of sovereign debt remain unchanged. Debt service crowds out other spending. Foreign creditors gain leverage. Military overreach becomes unsustainable, and the debt spiral accelerates once interest becomes a major budget item. The Ottoman Empire learned this lesson over decades of decline. The question for America is whether it will heed this historical warning before reaching a similar breaking point. Thank you for watching My Money Mint. If you have a topic you'd like to see me discuss in a future video, please let me know in the comments.